Well, Ahmed, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'd like to start this off just kind of learning a little bit about your role and what BILT does. Help me understand the mission of your organization.
Okay, thanks, Max. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. BILT is a mobile 3D software as a service platform. We offer 3D interactive and XR immersive instructions for products and work instructions and anything that individuals, companies would like to better explain, if you will, to the end user so that they can accomplish the mission or tasks of the particular instruction sets that we've created for them. In the company, I co-founded the company in 2015 with my business partner, Nate Henderson, and I serve as the president and chief operating officer at BILT.
That's awesome. I've actually played with the app. It's slick. It's very exciting. So I want to understand, how does this application and this company you built support the Department of Defense? Talk to me about some of the initiatives, some of the exciting things. How are end users, sailors, soldiers, and airmen in getting hold of this application?
So BILT is an award-winning commercial technology. We are used by hundreds of brands. We have thousands of SKUs, instructions tied to those SKUs. We've won many awards in the commercial sector. And in 2019, I learned about the AFWERX program, which is the innovation arm of the United States Air Force. AFWERX started in 2017, and I learned about them in 2019. And I applied for something called a commercial solution opening topic through the CIBR program that they run. And what we presented to them was that our award-winning commercial solution, BILT, could be adopted for use within the Department of the Air Force. And I showed it to several people, and they agreed. They said, this is fantastic. In fact, one squadron commander I was working with, or I was speaking to initially, his mission was to create actual training aids for multiple major commands in the Air Force. And he took a look at BILT and he said, I have requirements for BILT, which requirements are really important in the military. That's how, if you don't have a requirement, you're not going to get funding.
That's right.
And then he said, I don't have the expertise or the time and other resources just needed to be able to create what you've already created. And so he said, I will support you in the phase 2 process to try and obtain additional funding to get some additional traction in the Air Force.
That's awesome. I know a lot of companies, they go through the CIBR process. So congratulations. I think that's fantastic. Talk to me about some of the challenges when it comes to getting your technology approved, whether it's through accreditation. How have you guys leveraged the CIBR process to kind of, go through some of those processes? And, so talk to me about a little bit about that.
So if I'll back it up to 2015. In 2015, okay. Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense, went out to Silicon Valley, and he gave a speech in Silicon Valley. And he said, hey, we need your mind share, all you young startups. We need your technology. If we're going to keep the United States protected and defended properly, we can't do it unless we have your mind share and all the tech that you're developing here in Silicon Valley. And the response was, we're not going to work with you. Your processes are terrible. We don't have the opportunity or the ability or the funding to go through the hoops that were created during the Cold War to onboard new tech into the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, throughout the Department of Defense. And to Ashton Carter's credit, the SecDef at the time, he said, okay, I hear you. We're going to make some changes. Now, there's a process by which everything is procured in the Department of Defense, and it's the Cold War legacy process that really favors primarily the prime contractors, the big ones.
The big ones.
And so companies like BILT and many others, there's just almost no way in. And so they stood up something called DIU, Experimental Defense Innovation Unit, Experimental. Actually, it was a reserve Navy SEAL admiral and some bunch of reservists. And they put this organization together. And over time, it transitioned to basically a full-time unit within the Department of Defense. Today, it's called the Defense Innovation Unit. And it uses different processes to be able to pay for new technology and to bring it in, if you will, I'm going to say circumventing the PPB&E process, which is the old Cold War procurement process. The Air Force watched this and in 2017 created AFWERX. And as I mentioned earlier, I learned about the process in 2019. So had we not been able to come in through this process, there's no way we would have been able to go through the typical SAM.gov process that takes a long time and a lot of money to try and go through a elongated process that would ultimately 9 times out of 10, you're never going to make it through that gauntlet anyway.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard the exact same thing, especially when it comes to budgeting reform. I know there's still a lot of work to be done there. So now that you have some of these contracts, in terms of dealing with some of the security challenges, because it is data that we want to secure, we're all patriots. How have you handled the ATO process? If you could just touch on that
Sure.
a little bit about, how have you leveraged the CIBR that you have to kind of work towards the ATO, because I think that's a big challenge for a lot of startups.
It certainly is. Yeah, it certainly is. So BILT's been fortunate. We've been able to win and be the recipient of multiple CIBR phase 1s and phase 2s. Also, we've had one TechFi contract. It's just really a phase 2. And so we've been able to get a lot of traction and a lot of interest. And with that, everyone says, well, how do we start using this? We're ready to go. The end users in the Air Force, multiple commands that we're working with, they really like BILT, and they believe it's game changing and it can really help them. And it's better than anything else that they have out there. And we've known about this cybersecurity process for quite some time. But I will tell you, it is so broken, the process to get certified, whatever that means. They talk about CMMC, they talk about FedRAMP, they talk about ATO. And then as you dig deeper, there's like other kind of layers underneath that. Maybe you can get a provisional ATO. In the Air Force, there's 24 authorizing officials. I've yet to ever speak to one. I have tried to get to one. I've even spoken with the CIO of the Air Force, their office. I've met with one of their leading officials, and they just really, frankly, not a lot of help. And it's just so broken. It's like everybody just kind of passes the buck to someone else. And so we talk out of, from a policy standpoint, we need new tech to win in strategic competition against our enemies around the world to keep the country safe. Yet the process to bring new tech in is so onerous that I'm just not sure, how we're going to cross all these hurdles when nobody's on the same sheet of music. Defense Department and the different services. Everyone's doing something different.
Everybody's doing it differently. Yeah. Yeah, something's got to change, right? So I know you had made some investment before you brought on Ignyte into doing some of this yourself with the whole NIST controls and things like that. But I would love to hear from you. Why did you select Ignyte to kind of help with this process? And would love to understand, why did you select us?
Okay. Well, we did all the reading we could. We got as smart as we could. We began attending I think it was weekly or every few weeks, a webinar that AFWorks held with their CIO. And she was helpful up to a point, and then just didn't know anything beyond a certain point. And AFWorks, their mandate really isn't to get you certified with an ATO. Their mandate is to help you get started. So we learned all we could from the AFWorks CIO. We went online. We read everything we could about the FedRAMP process. We read everything we could about ATOs in the Air Force, and frankly, some of the other services as well. And I hired a full-time person to help me just begin to gather the information and put it all together. I had a consultant who had been on the commercial side working to try and get certifications for folks as well. NIST 800 is a known standard. It's used in the private sector as well. And we began to realize that when we went into meetings with the government, we actually were the smartest people in the room. After a little bit of time, myself and some of my teammates, we knew more. And we realized they were either making stuff up, they were just saying blanket statements like, you need X, and you'd press them a little bit, and you realize they really truly didn't know either. And they just knew that somebody had scared them into saying, you can't buy SaaS unless it has X certification. And because it's been such a disaster within the Department of Defense and trying to actually give people a clear pathway to get certified, people are just all over the place with this stuff. And then there's the people that are picking winners and losers inside the Department of Defense, where some organizations will say, okay, we want their stuff. We're just going to brute force it through until we get them to where they need to be. Last company I talked to who received an ATO, actually 2 companies told me it took them 4 years to get their ATO. Meanwhile, they were still doing stuff. And I actually never asked them if they got provisional status, but they had some kind of status that allowed them in the testing mode to be able to continue to push forward.
So that's actually very accurate. It takes a very, very long time. Can you highlight a little bit about, so some of these challenges you're discussing, what about Ignyte?
Yes.
Right? What about Ignyte? that made you go, aha, I want to work with this team?
So I shared our experience with
Yes.
you all, just you understood the journey we've been through. And when I first learned about Ignyte, I took a look at the background of the people that were working there. Max, obviously, you have a background in cyber. You're former Air Force active duty member, and then had also worked at the FedRAMP program office. So your background impressed me right off the bat. In addition, you had a software solution, a tool that would track compliance and track progress, because I felt that if we could show where we were at in the process and be transparent and be able to have updates and to show to our Air Force customers and people that were interested in working with BILT, that would help me to help them have confidence that BILT's actually a really secure tool. In fact, we follow really good cybersecurity standards. We don't believe we're unsecure at all. We believe we're very secure. That doesn't mean we can't not add additional layers if they're required, but we take data privacy and data protection very, very seriously. What we haven't been able to do is run the gauntlet of the Department of Defense cybersecurity programs or the Air Force's cybersecurity programs, because it's really, really challenging and difficult. You and I talked about earlier about this kind of chicken or the egg thing too.
Yeah.
What do you have a contract? Okay, now you have a contract. Okay, well, are you ready to go big time? Are they going to fund you for phase 3 to move out of AFRIC's money? Well, we're not going to even work with you until you're at that point. And then you just kind of crawl to a standstill, at least on moving forward on that kind of stuff. And then you hear about people that punch through it and somebody pulled them through, and then they got their certification. So there's a big disconnect between policy, where they're requesting help from the private sector to bring in award-winning commercial tech, and then the ability to deliver it and put it into the hands of airmen, soldiers, sailors, or Marines.
Well, I really appreciate you, Ahmed, just selecting us. It's been a pleasure working with you. For the purpose of this interview, do you feel comfortable sharing some of your customers within the Air Force? I don't know if that's public knowledge or not. Obviously, we worked with some of them, but would love to hear more about which offices you're working with and what kind of impact are they seeing with your technology.
Yeah, there's been some press releases out there, but for example, in the United States Navy, we've done some work with Naval Sea Systems Command, and we're excited to continue to build out that opportunity with them. But they also will at some point require us to have these appropriate cyber certifications. And,
sure.
And so we're talking with them and working with them as well to continue to push things forward. Within the Air Force, we're working with multiple organizations across the Air Force. Our first cyber was with, our first cyber phase 2 was with the 367 Training Support Squadron at Hale Air Force Base. They're part of the 82nd Training Wing in the Air Education Training Command, and worked with a great lieutenant colonel there, Colonel Carter, who really liked our technology and felt we had something that could absolutely benefit every maintainer in the Air Force. And so when you hear that validated from a customer, we were pretty excited. And so we've done a lot of work to try and make that happen. But again, we need help on cybersecurity. Ultimately, if we're gonna get BILT into the hands of every maintainer in the Air Force, and not just the Air Force, across the Department of Defense, we need everyone to feel comfortable with how we're protecting what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I know when I was just an airman and enlisted, so we had to follow a lot of instruction, and some of the information, we used to call it STINFO, scientific and technical information. It had to be secured a certain way. So having instructions in a digital format, I think it's going to be a game changer, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about some of the milestones we have made so far when it comes to Ignyte team interacting with the customer as your public sector security team and whatnot, and how has that made it easier to work with other agencies and whatnot?
I think almost everyone we've talked to in the private sector and in the government, again, they're only skin deep of what they actually know about cybersecurity. And so you all, Ignyte as a team, is able to talk with authority and confidence about what is known and what is out there, right? Because your background and experience in dealing with this. So you've all been able to take everything we've done and paint a story, an accurate story of where we are at currently in the process, and to help us explain where we're at to the government entities that we're trying to work with.
That's awesome. That's the main goal, right? Because in theory, from a policy perspective, we're all supposed to be doing the same thing, but everybody is doing something slightly different. So this story, this progress we have made, can you speak to how that has impacted your customer base in terms of the ability to transact better or convey with some sort of assurance that, this stuff is actually being taken care of, right? So when we're working with the Navy versus the Air Force, how has some of our processes and things we've done helped you as a business and also impacted your relationship with your customer?
I think it just gives them confidence that we're moving in the right direction. I think they're overwhelmed too, that they're not quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
And they know they have other companies they're trying to move along through the process. So, I've asked you for statements before. Hey, how do we package up and say where we're at, and then give that to our government clients, if you will, customers, to be able to help them understand where we're at in the process. So I think that's been very, very helpful. Just messaging that we have a fractional CISO,
Sure.
Chief Information Security Officer, I think that helps them know that we're serious about what we're doing when it comes to cybersecurity and data protection and privacy.
Well, you certainly made the investment. I see a lot of companies out there, they want to get into the whole ATO and the FedRAMP and all that, but yet they don't make a deliberate action or any kind of investment towards it. So I see you guys doing it differently. So I think it's going to pay off. We still have a lot of work to do, obviously, right? But one of the things I wanted to talk about next is your experience in collaborating with Ignyte. So we've assigned a couple of team members, Josh, and he's working with John and a few others. Can you talk to me about what's it like to collaborate with Ignyte on a day-to-day basis? What has your experience been?
Well, obviously, we don't talk every day because we're pretty busy. But I know once we had our kickoff meeting, we made the assignments, and we said who's going to work with who and what the deliverables are going to be on a weekly basis. That's really been super helpful for us in the phase that we're in right now, which is documenting everything that we have on file. A lot of it is, do we have the right policies in place? And, are there any easy, low-hanging fruit things we can take care of, if you will, to help move the needle from a percentage basis towards ultimate compliance? We've been tracking those on a weekly basis, and that's really important for us to show that we're making progress week to week, and I know we have. And at some point we go fast, and at some point we go slow, but it's all, as long as we're moving forward towards the end goal, and we believe we can get to the certification, that's important for us. And I just can't afford to sit around, because
Sure.
I have customers that I know have already told me they're ready to go. They're ready to use us full time, but I know we're not going to be able to do that until we make a lot more progress on the cybersecurity end. Again, not that we have bad cybersecurity. We know we have good cybersecurity, but it's the documentation and the checking of the boxes and having a third party come in and recheck that stuff on top of what we've already checked. All that takes time.
It's a daunting task.
Yeah.
It certainly is. So from your perspective, as one of the co-founders of this firm, what would you say has been the most insightful when it comes to compliance tasks or just working on these kinds of things? Because you've had a consultant before, you've read up on it, you went through the webinars. When you're working with us, what would you say you found most insightful and helpful so far?
Well, you're practitioners. You all have done this, and you know what you're doing, and you've helped other companies. And as I said before, you're insiders from the federal government in terms of you worked and done cyber in the Air Force, and you'd helped stand up the FedRAMP program office, and so you understand, at least at that time, what they were asking for. And I know you keep up with current policy. That's another thing. I forget that policy came out not too long ago.
Equivalency.
Yeah. When that policy came out, boy, you immediately notified us and said, hey, this is interesting. This could be game changing to the process to get certified. And so now we have adjusted course a little bit based on this new policy that's just come out to try and move the needle forward to be able to get to where we need to go. So that, I don't have time to read every single thing and stay on track of it. By having a CISO or a fractional CISO and Ignyte to help us, it's super helpful for you. It's comforting for me to know that you're on point, and you can actually let me know when these things pop.
I think that FedRAMP equivalency, Ahmed, we're very excited about it. Not a lot of people in the Air Force know about it. So I believe once they start to understand what the memo is, because it is supposed to make it easier for smaller businesses to certify, not accredit, certify, and then the Air Force can actually use these technology. Because as you said, the big primes, they have it in. They have CUI, they have this kind of data. How are they doing it? So this policy, this change within FedRAMP equivalency, I'm hoping that it's a positive for for
Well,
BILT.
part of that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that often we're the smartest people in the room.
Mhm.
And so we find ourselves educating the customer. And I know they appreciate that. I know we've gone into meetings with you and you've been able to explain things to them, and they've appreciated it as well. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Much of this is, I think, positive posturing
Mhm.
to help the government customer know that we take it seriously, and that we are doing everything we can in our power to actually put the proper cybersecurity policies in place.
Well, I'll tell you what makes my job easier, because it's typically not this way. You guys have already made the investment in cyber before you ever hired us. So we know that you take cybersecurity serious. You have a true, what we call a dual use technology. You're already in the commercial space. So you have customers like Weber and Home Depot and others. So there's already a base understanding of risk management, of cybersecurity risk management. Translating that over to the government is a lot easier than if you had done nothing.
Sure.
Right. So
Sure.
I think I think just what you're doing is just enhancing a little bit, and so just taking what you already have and just adding on to it makes it a lot easier for us in order to do our job to convey with confidence to the government in terms of where you are when it comes to the FedRAMP side of the house. So which we appreciate. We actually don't see that quite a bit. It's usually like, why were you doing security?
Yeah.
And so, like you said, you guys take it very serious.
Yeah, and I've talked to you before. I've been in the reserves, in a reserve capacity since '92, and I've been on active duty myself. And these things are very important on the active duty side of the house. And so, as we began to expand our business at BILT, this is one of those things that I've always felt was very important. And of course, my business partner does as well. But I have the charge to make sure in the company, I lead this effort in our company to ensure that everyone is compliant, that each of our employees take cybersecurity seriously, because we generate data,
Yeah.
and we want to protect our customers' data. It's very, very important to us.
So I get a lot of CEOs and executives asking me, why should I do FedRAMP? Why is it important? And some of them have never worked in the defense space. Some of them have. You guys are choosing to go down that path. It's a very painful path. We all know it.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Well, we live in a digital world. Data is everywhere. I mean, look at under the Obama administration, the OPM hack that happened when it took everybody's data, during that had a security clearance, right?
Mhm.
And it was terrible. And how many other Solar Wind right here in Texas? They're one of the top cybersecurity companies out there, and they were hacked. It just, one thing after another. Everyone's data is being sold on the dark web, and so it doesn't matter what job you're in today. There's data tied to it, and you have to protect it. I don't care if you're an independent contractor, plumber going to people's houses. You're taking transactions and payments, and you probably use an app. You need to protect your customers' data. And if you don't, well, you may lose business, actually. It could become an existential threat to your business if you don't take it seriously.
I 100% agree with that. In fact, that's the core tenets of our organization, is to protect and create transparency. But help me understand why FedRAMP. So data security is very serious, right? But when it comes to accreditation matters, certification matters, why do you think that's important for your company strategically as the leader of the organization? What will the certification do for your organization?
Well, it is a known stamp of approval as probably the highest level and best accreditation out there. And I know there are companies that use the FedRAMP accreditation process,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's almost an automatic that the commercial business can then say, well, we have this
That's right.
government standard already. And there's others. There's ISO out there as well, and you can go for. But I even heard, I can't remember who told me this, that there's Canadian companies and the Canadian government, I believe, they know that FedRAMP is very much a gold standard,
a quote unquote gold standard.
Yeah. And so that's why we want to do it. Now, we're not trying to do more than we have to, meaning I'm not trying to put in place a standard that is so far beyond anything we need, but I'm trying to do reasonable standards that, we can afford.
That's right.
Because I could put standards in place that are so expensive, it would break the bank. And frankly, they're not necessary. What I want to do is put in place the best cybersecurity standards and practices as possible that will protect the business. And then through continuous monitoring of policy and new tools, And one of the things you all do as well is you track all that, and you make you advise us on what else we might need to do based on standards that are changing that are out there.
I think it's an investment for the business, and what we're hoping is that it unlocks doors for a lot of organizations, because it is a gold standard, and there's a lot of reciprocity between FedRAMP and, as you mentioned,
Yeah,
ISO
you mentioned
standards.
reciprocity to me quite a bit, and I think that makes sense. It's good policy. So I'm looking forward to us being able to, nail this with one organization in the government, and then go
Re-leverage
for
it.
re-leverage that and go for reciprocity. I think we need to do it. It's otherwise you're
Doing the
wasting
same
time
thing
and
over
money.
over.
And I hope the government, will get better at this
That's
for
right.
us,
Yeah.
so that they can help with transparency for us and not make us do this 4 and 5 and 6 times.
What advice would you give to businesses that are looking to solve this ATO problems, whether they're cyber recipients like your organization, or an organization that has been struggling with this? What would you say to them if they're looking to select a company like Ignyte?
For any company you're going to hire, you need to interview them and get to know them really well. So I would say with Ignyte, you schedule time with the senior executive team to sit down with them and to lay out what your particular business is and what your challenges are, and then ask for their feedback and get that feedback and review it. Ask any questions you might have, but don't delay. You need to get started. I find most companies are already behind the 8 ball, if you will, and are not moving forward in the right direction. They're hesitant for some reason. Well, there's no hesitancy right now in this day and age. We're in a digital age where you are likely already behind. And with all the hacks and breaches that are happening today, you cannot afford to run a business and not have the proper cybersecurity controls protecting your customers' data.
Well, Ahmed, again, I wanted to thank you for selecting us, and this was wonderful. So
you're welcome. We're glad to have you a part of our BILT team, and I mean that. You are our CISO, and you're part of the BILT team, and we couldn't move forward and do what we need to do without you. So thank you very much.